Good morning, everybody, and thank you, David, for your warm welcome. And it's really good to be with you here this morning and to have the opportunity to talk a bit about Tearfund's work and what we do. And I suppose the first thing I want to do is to really thank you for all the support that you have given to this organisation, which we've already been seen and demonstrated by the mission report. I think it's important to remember that we don't take it for granted as an organisation, and especially in the last few challenging years, the sacrificial giving of churches like yourselves up and down the country is an incredible gift of God and as a blessing to us as an organisation and to the people that we serve. So I suppose the first question, you see, it's just like being with the boys and girls, we always start with asking questions. The first question is, do you have a pet hate? Okay, now, any of my colleagues that work with me is that my pet hate is the misuse of the apostrophe. Look, I know, it drives me crazy if I see potatoes with an apostrophe, or people using apostrophes for plurals whenever it's actually possessive. Anyway, so that gets me, and even in work they talk about Helen's red pen. So, but I am genuinely a nice person, do you know what I mean? And I'm getting prayer for it, folks. I'm going to get over it. But one of the things that I'm sure gets an awful lot of you going is when pet owners don't follow the notice on this sign. A number of years ago, I worked as an engagement officer with Conswater Community Greenway down in East Belfast, and that's supposed to be an open space that everybody can enjoy, cyclists, pedestrians, dog owners or not dog owners, and people who didn't clear up after themselves. It was particularly horrible for people who have small children, as I'm sure those of you that have had children or still have little ones around, how difficult it is. Now, I am sure there are no irresponsible dog owners that are members of Annalong Presbyterian, and if there is, I'm sure David will take you to one side and speak to you, okay? Wouldn't want to see you being put out, because there is room for forgiveness and redemption. But leaving dog poo behind you is a pretty good definition of self-centeredness. I don't want to pick it up, so I'm going to let somebody else do it. And of course, we're all a wee bit like that. We're not perfect. And, there are a number of things that we do where we display our tendency to look out for ourselves. Multiply this by 8 billion, and we might begin to see why we are where we are now. The world isn't where it should be. It's broken. You don't need me to come here and tell you that. Children are going hungry right here in Northern Ireland. And all around the world, families are being torn apart by conflict. And conflicts that maybe aren't in the news right now, like Congo and South Sudan. David mentioned Yemen earlier on. Yemen has been through horrendous suffering, especially the children. Women and girls are suffering abuse and violence in many ways. We've got loneliness, disease, depression, anger, hate, racism, sectarianism, on and on it goes. Something isn't right with the world. We know this from our own experience, and we know it in our own hearts. And as Christians, we should understand more than anybody else why this is so. We have a broken relationship with God. And as one theologian put it, the human heart is an idol factory, so easily entangled with sin, set to the default mode of looking after number one. Things aren't as they're meant to be. They're not as they're meant to be in my heart, and they're not as they're meant to be out there. At Tearfund, our calling is to follow Jesus where the need is greatest. And today, I want to bring you 5,000 miles away to a place called Zambia. Zambia is a landlocked country in southern Africa. In some ways, Zambia is quite a success story. It's managed to maintain a peaceful, democratic society in the midst of a pretty turbulent neighbourhood. The economy is growing, and as a country, it's avoided food shortages and crisis situations that other countries have experienced in recent years. And yet, 60% of the country live in poverty. Zambia continues to have one of the highest rates of malnutrition in Africa, and 1/3 of the children are malnourished. And while the vast majority of children get to primary school, the numbers drop considerably for secondary education. And this is especially true for young girls. Issues including child marriage, violence, and community attitudes to girls being educated all put barriers up to them continuing in education. Zambia isn't as it's meant to be. At Tearfund, we often say that poverty isn't God's plan. It isn't good or fair that anyone lives in poverty. And it isn't good or fair that girls in Zambia can't continue in education while we expect nothing less for our own daughters. It isn't good or fair that the majority of people in Zambia are hungry today. Conflict, corruption, disease, drought, these things aren't how God has made the world. This isn't how it's meant to be. In Mark chapter 5 and throughout the Gospels, we read of the ushering in of God's kingdom. We get glimpses through the words and works of Jesus of what it looks like when God reigns, when God fixes things that are broken, when Jesus deals with things that are not as they are meant to be. We start with the passage that we read, the man possessed by legion. He cuts himself in a rage with stones. He lives alone in a graveyard, an unclean and isolated place. He is living a broken life in a fallen world, physically, socially, and of course spiritually. He is feeling the full force of the world sickness caused by sin. So what does God's reign look like when Jesus deals with the man? I love this. In verse 15, he was dressed and in his right mind. And later on, he goes on into the city to tell others about what has happened. Indeed, he wants to stay with Jesus, the man who has transformed his life. He has experienced physical, social, and spiritual restoration. And as a church, as a Christian community, that's our business. That's our focus. That's where we want to be as a community. We love stories like this, don't we? Stories where Jesus sweeps in and ushers in total transformation. And that's why we love testimonies. That's why when you come and hear this chap, Simon, did you say his name? John, when you come and hear John tonight, that's what'll get you excited, because you'll be hearing about his transformed life and the difference that has made. Faith making a difference right here in the real world. The rest of Mark 5 continues with two more encounters that will be familiar to us. A woman with chronic bleeding, a life experiencing the full force of separation and isolation, loneliness and desperation as she's cut off from other people. That's not how it was meant to be for her. And Jesus restores not only her body, but restores her place in the society. He brings healing not just on the outside, but on the inside too. That's what God's reign looks like. People on the outside are drawn in. The lost are found, the orphan is adopted, the unclean is washed white as snow. And the final story in that chapter is about Jairus' daughter, who was raised to life again. So even death is no obstacle to Jesus. Death is fixed when God reigns. The good news for us this morning is not only does God do this very own thing in our own lives, heals our brokenness, deals with our sin, restores what is lost, he also invites us to be part of the step-by-step, gradual advancement of his kingdom, of God's reign across the world in hearts and homes and communities. The Church of Jesus Christ, that's you and I, and our brothers and sisters in places like Zambia. The church is God's plan A. It's also his plan B, C, D, all the way to Z as well. The church is God's plan to ushering in the renewal and restoration of God's reign of his kingdom. And that is Tearfund's calling. Through the equipping and power of God's Spirit to partner with the church to see communities experience the kind of transformation that is possible when God's reign comes in the world. So this isn't just thoughtless aid. This isn't just about handing out money with no thought of where it's going or the consequences. It's not just a generosity that makes us feel good. We are partnering with God as his kingdom breaks forth in the world. And what could be better than that calling? I'm going to show you a short video to show you a wee bit of what that looks like as an introduction to Tearfund's work in Zambia. And then I want to tell you a story.
My name is Ann Mumbi. I'm the country director for Tearfund in Zambia. I would like to welcome you to Zambia, a land of 1 million opportunities. And we are working with the local church to unlock these opportunities by equipping and empowering the leadership and the church congregations to realize the local resources that God has given us. Zambia has several challenges. Youth unemployment is really one of the big ones. We also have a lot of small-scale farmers that normally would not have access to inputs. We also have a challenge in terms of climate change now that is really a big issue. So a number of communities face droughts, others get flooded. That makes it even worse for small-scale farmers and households, especially in the rural areas. And so this is why as Tearfund we are working with the local church to equip it and to empower them so they can actually be able to look at locally available resources and also be able to be given skills. So a number of pastors and leaders at church level, women groups in the church, young people in the church have begun to engage in small businesses. Others have intensified in terms of agriculture. The Bible studies are the central part of the activities that are happening in the communities, and that is bringing a mindset transformation. I think the church has begun to make an indelible contribution towards poverty reduction in Zambia. Without your support, some of these stories would not be told. I want to say thank you to the supporters. You have been great. You are part of the stories of change that are happening in Zambia at household level, at church level, at community level, even at national level. You are part of the stories of many, many families and churches that have experienced genuine and true transformation.
This is Violet. She is from Surinje in central Zambia. A few years ago in this area, the churches had come together with the support of Tearfund to really wrestle with and rediscover their calling, to bring holistic gospel transformation, the kingdom change that I've talked about, to their community. And they took part in Tearfund's Transforming Communities programme. Now, you may have heard in the past about CCT, Church and Community Transformation. This is a simple but powerful training programme about ending poverty in a community by supporting local churches to lead long-term, locally owned solutions. So as a community, they caught a vision about what they could do for their area. And their first priority was that they wanted every child in their area to be educated. The local bishop, Bishop Sampson, said of these first few years, "We were supporting thousands of girls and boys to go through school, paying for their fees, buying school equipment, everything they needed." Absolutely incredible. The local church saw something on their doorstep that wasn't what it was meant to be, and they wanted to do something about it. And it was all local. Local vision, local resources, local skills. Simply supported and equipped and encouraged by Tearfund. So Violet, like many of the girls I told before, finished her primary education, but there was no girls' secondary nearby. So like many girls, she had a long and dangerous walk to school and felt vulnerable and unsafe and was ready to pack it in. So once again, the local church stepped in. They saw that girls were dropping out of school. Many were forced to live in temporary accommodation nearby the school that wasn't really very safe and secure. Some ended up entering into early marriage and stopping school. So the local church and the bishop said, "We can find a solution to this." So what they did was, the churches built a girls' dormitory, and together with support from Tearfund, raised the resources to employ Ruth. Ruth is the matron of the girls' dormitory and leads the teaching and protection of girls in the school. The girls are safe. They are learning together, and they are learning from Ruth, a wonderful woman of God who loves these girls and sees the potential that God has put in them. And Ruth says she takes as her role model Hannah. She is a woman who depended on God, she says. "Hannah stirs my spirit to pray, just to pray, to come before the Lord to pray for this dormitory." Whatever the context, the outcome is the same. When the church takes seriously its calling to love its neighbour, it makes a difference. Which is why we as an organisation love this work. Not only is a community able to lift themselves out of poverty, but the church grows, the church thrives as people catch the vision for what is possible when God moves by his Spirit and mobilises Christians to bring transformation. Whether it's here on our doorstep, across the world, in Zambia, or in places like the Middle East or Ukraine, the work of the church is a little glimpse in the midst of conflict and brokenness, a little signpost to what the world will look like when Christ comes completely. When we move from the now and the not yet of God's kingdom, when we move from seeing God by faith and not by sight, to that final moment of restoration and renewal, when we hear the words of the Lamb, "Behold, I am making all things new." And that's where we see the depth and truth of those words from Revelation 22. "And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations, and no longer will there be any curse." That's what we're playing our part in. We aren't putting plaster on a problem. We aren't throwing money simply at things that run so deeply that they can't be fixed by the most generous donor. But we aren't shrugging our shoulders and waiting till God comes to fix things once and for all. We are joining with God in what he is doing. So let me tell you a little bit more about how we as Tearfund want you to help you play your part. You can pray for eyes to see where God is moving and what he is doing right here in this place, in your home, in your street. What does a glimpse of God's reign look like among the brokenness you see around you? What are the signposts of God already at work? And please pray. Please pray for us at Tearfund, for the team here in Northern Ireland led up by Chris Thompson, and for colleagues all over the world. Play protection in dangerous places and pray for opportunities for those individuals to get the resources to see communities and lives transformed. Your generosity can change lives today and is already changing lives today by the generosity of what you have done as a church community. As individuals, we also encourage people to partner with us, and some of you may already be doing that. And at the door this morning, some of you would have got, but you can pick up on the way out, a little leaflet which tells you a little bit more about what's going on around the world, and also how you can be part of what Tearfund is doing, either through finance, or if that's not the way God is leading you, certainly through prayer. And I would really encourage you to get our quarterly magazine with a little prayer guide, little prayer diary, which is fantastic, because not only does it help you to pray, but it also gives you information. As an individual, just to let you know, as well as those high level figures, £12 a month could deliver that CCT training I was talking about to 2 communities. So there's small ways that you can give, or big ways that you can give, but every single penny will be used effectively for the power of the kingdom. All it really is for me to say is to say thank you for inviting me here this morning, to say thank you for all your generosity over years, thank you for your prayers, thank you for your encouragement, thank you for your partnership with the organisation. And if there's any questions you want to ask me, well, I'll be around on the way out. But alternatively, if there's anything you think of or anything you want to know, our office in Belfast, Deborah will always answer the phone and is happy to answer any questions that you might have. Once again, thank you, and I'm just going to hand back to David now.